Hello and welcome back to my studio. I'm drawing a nose today. Noses and other facial features can be a little challenging. Everyone wants to create eyes and I love drawing eyes, but I wanted to show you a video on how to draw noses. And they seem to be difficult to draw because there are no real edges at all, only a nostril and an outline. The first part of the profile drawing begins with a 7B pencil. I want to lay down a fair amount of graphite, and the easiest way to begin is with the nostril. A 7B pencil is a very soft leaded pencil and is excellent for blending. I put a lot of shadow in, although I'm using light pressure, and I'm using the tip of the pencil since I want to create really crisp and clear edges. I'm using singular strokes. I keep my reference next to me, and I find it easier, and my students do too, to keep your reference roughly the same size as your artwork, because this way you can follow exactly the shapes without worrying all about the proportions or having to resize everything. You can create a line with more than just one line. Just go lightly and make sure your pencil is really sharp. I like to use a General's manual sharpener, and the pencil that I like to use for my graphite work is the Faber-Castell 9000 series. These pencils keep a sharp and a hard point and rarely need sharpening. Don't be concerned at the darkness of the lines. This is a 6B pencil. It lays down quite a bit of pigment as opposed to harder leads like 2H or 4H or 6H, but we want a softer lead so that the nose can be blended. And this is the only pencil I used for both of the noses that I'm showing you today. To lay down pigment, I hold the pencil way back almost to the end of the pencil so that the pencil is laying down on its side, and I place in some of the shadows. I work large when I do studies, and it's really much easier to work large. Working smaller might be tempting because you'll think it's faster, but it's actually more difficult. To aid the shading, I always like to squint, and this seems to break down the drawing so that I can see my lights and my darks better, which is what drawing is all about. The contrast between the lightest part and the darkest part. Because when we're drawing, we're creating an illusion of 3 dimensions on a 2-dimensional surface, and contrast is really important to create that illusion. So here's what not to do when drawing noses. Avoid too many harsh outlines. Instead, just pay attention to the shape. A nostril is basically made up of a shape with a shadow. Pay attention to the reference and draw exactly what you see and not what you think you see. If this means erasing a lot, then erase a lot. Don't forget that making mistakes is the absolute best way to learn. How will we learn otherwise? I like to do preparatory drawings before I commit to my final drawing. It's a bit like doing warm-up exercises at the gym. It's all in preparation. Authors do this with their writings too. John Steinbeck used to warm up by writing a letter every day to his editor before he began his novels. Warm-ups just help to get everything going, and this way I can work out any of the more challenging areas beforehand. You can do this in a designated sketchbook or on individual sheets, and you can write down the challenges you faced if you like to help later on. Practice like this is really important. I use a paper towel to blend some of the graphite, and I haven't placed any detail in yet. Those will come later. It's tempting to put all the little details in first, but it's best to leave them at the very end. For now, I just want some smooth shading. And during the drawing process, it's all about adding and taking away, meaning putting pigment down and blending, and then removing some of the pigment and doing that all over again to create lots of lightly built up layers. You can press quite hard when you blend out with the tissue, and I'm using paper by Strathmore Bristol Smooth. It's the smoothest paper for graphite work with no tooth. Any sketchbook will work though, and if you don't have anything, practice on some computer paper as that's smooth too. It's not necessary to spend a lot of money to sketch, and if all you have is an HB or a mechanical pencil from the dollar store, those will work great as well. Just use what you have and just draw. Some more do's and don'ts. Don't rush your work. These two noses took me about an hour, that's all, and then I came back and I did some final adjustments that took another 5 or 10 minutes. All drawing takes time. It's worth it because we build muscle memory this way. Start with the best reference you can find. I almost took a photo of my own nose, but I found it too tricky to get good lighting, so I purchased a stock photo online. I just need decent photos for my tutorials, but you could ask a friend to take a photo. And of course you don't need to have the perfect nose by any means, because these are just studies. Websites like Pixabay, Pexels and Unsplash are all free photo sites that have good photography that you can use. But if you're just practicing and not selling your work, you can use any reference you find online. To bring out highlights, I like to use a Tombow Mono Zero eraser, and this is a wonderful tool to erase small areas of the graphite. And I sweep away particles with a clean and fluffy makeup brush, and this keeps my fingers, which might have oils in them, away from my work. I can use the point of the blending stump to soften the outside edges, and in order not to smudge my work, I place down a sheet of glassine. When lifting with the Tombow Mono eraser, I can go in tiny circles. I'm seeing some pores and texture as well as highlights in the nose. With the blending stump, I go in circles too, so that there aren't any obvious stop and start lines. And I can press quite hard with the stump. Everything about a nose is subtle, and later I'll add in some freckles and some of the darker pores. This is part of a longer Patreon tutorial, and I'm offering Patreon tutorials that you can follow along with me. I provide the royalty-free original artwork, line art, and a complete supply list, and I narrate in real time, showing you every single step of the way. Patreon's a great way to learn. It's commitment free, you can cancel anytime you like, and my tutorials start at only $4 a month, so that's learning for only $1 a week. I share all the tips and techniques that I use, and if you want to see sneak previews, follow the link below that takes you to my Patreon tutorial library, and you can click on any of the links to watch a segment to see my teaching style, pace, the types of things that I talk about as I draw, and as a member you get access to an entire library of tutorials in graphite, charcoal, coloured pencil, pastel pencil, pan pastel, acrylic, preparation how-tos, and also airbrushing. And don't be afraid to put in some really dark shadows. Contrast is what makes drawings look good. I add in freckles and then lighten them up a bit, and I constantly go back and forth with the highlights, details, and I smooth out every single time. The more details you add at the end of your work, even the imperfections, the more realistic it'll look. Before I begin with the second nose, I made sure that I covered up my drawing. I add some shading by laying down the pencil on its side as well, and this takes off the pressure. The main focal point in this nose are the nostrils. To create the side of the nose, I use long circular motions, laying that pencil down and squinting so that I can see the shadows better. I commit to the shapes as I see them, as I know I can always erase everything and modify as I go. The first part of a drawing is always the hardest, to establish those main shapes, and I often don't like the first part of it, but it's important to persevere. I haven't felt rushed, and anyway this drawing only took a little over an hour. I spent more time blending than I did actually doing the drawing, I think. That building up of layers is really important. Blending and smoothing out with the tissue helps to remove some of the graininess that you get with graphite. And I'm just going round and around in circles. I can start to finally see a nose shape develop, and I also use circular motions to create texture. I'm not creating large circles, just small circles. And this part is critical to create a realistic nose, and it really starts to make things come alive. This part goes really quickly with the Tombow Mono eraser. You could do it with a kneaded eraser, but it's just easier with this little tool, and I'm basically just carving out some texture and lightening things up gently. Subtlety is key in drawings. And after the highlights, I create tiny freckles with the 7B pencil again. The last 10 minutes of a drawing are really the important part, I think, because this is the time when, preferably, you've walked away from it overnight or after several hours, to then reconsider what refinements or changes you want to make. I decided that I needed to redefine the shape of the nostrils and add in a lot more contrast and shading. Adding in a lot more contrast helped to give the nose shape and more believability. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video, and please don't forget to like, subscribe and hit that little notification button if you want to stay alerted to my new content. And as always, I'll see you in the next video.